Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and this is my third attempt shooting this video because I keep making mistakes, because I keep forgetting stuff, because I'm trying to go over how to make these lounge pants, pajama bottoms, based off some that you already have on hand, and make sure I cover all the bases according to how you want to do it. So what I have here is a very old pair. They're at least 25 years old. They're starting to get some thin spots. I have another pair that I actually recently threw out that I bought at the same time. They had so many holes in it and so many patches that every time I'd put them on, I'd make another hole, and finally decided they're just beyond repair. So I tossed them. These are going to start getting to that point very soon because they're getting very, very thin. So I decided to get busy since I have a lot of flannel already on hand and make myself at least a couple pairs. Unfortunately, I already got my second pair cut out before I thought to shoot this video. So I'm not actually going to be cutting this fabric out. I'm just going to explain how I do it because I don't know that I want to make a third pair yet. So what you want to do, if you're using an old pair of lounge pants or pajama bottoms that you really like the fit of as a pattern, but you don't want to take them apart to use as a pattern, which you can do, which can make it a lot easier, because like these, I still have life left in them, so I don't really want to take them apart and put them back together. So I'm using these as is, as my pattern, and that's the way I usually do it. Now, if it is important for you, I like my pants very baggy, so I always buy them as big as I possibly can get them. And that's the great thing about making them, I can make them as baggy as I want, is if you like a lower rise in the front, if that's important to you, then you're going to have to take an extra step than I do when I'm making these. And so you're going to, like, these are already inside out, you can see. And so make sure they're inside out. That's the first important step when you're using something as a pattern. And then you're going to fold it so the front side is out here, and you're going to line up these seams here. This part is the most important part, making sure this is all lined up as straight as you can possibly get it, and then all the way down. If you're cutting this in 4 parts, that might be easier to do than what I'm going to show you. So, but I like to have just one solid leg so I don't have another seam on the outside like this has. This was done in 4 parts. But sometimes when it comes to cutting something like this out, it's easier to do in 4 parts because then you can simply, you have your fabric doubled over, you're cutting your 2 pieces out at the same time. But if you're trying to do this where you have a lower rise in the front, higher rise in the back, like I'm trying to show you, what you want to do, I suggest, is you can still do 2 wide pieces and lay them out, but it might be easier when you're doing, if you're trying to do one solid leg and a low rise and a high rise front and back, then what you're going to want to do is start with the inner part of the leg facing towards the edge of the fabric and leave the rest of this open. And then what you're going to do is line your pants up so that you got that farthest part, this is the front part of the crotch, is a little bit inside. You want to leave a little bit of space there. And then line everything up the way you want it, making sure this is straight. If you're using plaid, it's nice because you can use those as a guideline for how straight, of getting it nice and straight. And then the back, this top part here, this is the back. Expect that to stick out. When this is all lined up, this should be sticking out the top. So when you go to cut it out, you're going to fold that under so it's out of the way and you know what line that you're trying to follow. And then you're wanting to make sure that your pants are pulled down far enough this way so that you have plenty to work with up here. You're going to take this measurement here, if you're wanting this same width on your waistband, and then add about 1/4 inch of it or more, depending on your comfort as far as how much of a hem you want, how wide you want that hem. You're going to add that to that measurement to make sure you have enough to fold under. Then that's going to be how much more you'll need up here. So let's say the total ends up being 3 inches, then you're going to go 3 inches this way. And because when you have that low rise, you will naturally see a taper, you're going to need to probably draw a line to follow that taper, or just go by sight when you go to cut it. Now you're not going to cut this side. When you go to cut it, you're going to cut this way here, and then you're going to follow this basic line out at least a ½ an inch away from that seam. Give yourself extra to work with just in case. Either you decide you want it a little bit bigger, or you just you make a mistake and you have a little extra to work with. Sometimes I'll go out as much of an inch, and maybe I even like it that way once it's all done and it ends up being just a little bit bigger. Or you can just add that extra inch if you decide, I like the fit of these but wouldn't mind them being just a tad bit baggier. So what I do, because I like the fit of these around, then I follow it out about a ½ inch or so just to make sure I have extra in case. Same thing here, and then all the way down the leg, you're gonna leave that space. And then you get down here to the bottom and you're gonna use the same method you did at the top, figuring if you like the width of this hem like I do, I like this wide hem because it adds more weight to the bottom and makes the pants hang nicer. Then measure that, and you like the length of it all together and you know that's just right, then you're going to measure that, add about a ½ inch or to a ½ inch for your hem, and then add that total measurement to the bottom, and then that's going to be where you're going to cut. Now if you're using plaid, here you can do a straight line. That will work real nice. You can just follow the line, or with a print like this, and you would obviously need a chalk line to make sure you get it nice and straight. If you decide you would like them longer, like I decided, because I ordered these in the shortest length they came in because I'm a pretty short person. I'm only 5 foot. But since then decided I actually like my pajama bottoms longer so that they cover my feet more. So then I add a little bit more. And again, don't cut this side yet, okay? Because when you go to do the other side, what you're going to do is I suggest drawing a chalk line to follow. Then move your fabric over. So I'm going to pick this brown line right there to follow. And whichever line that was, it doesn't really matter because I'm not going to actually cut these out. Then you're going to take these and fold them the other way so the back side is the line that you're going to follow. Because what you're going to find then is once, and this is where again it matters, is you want to grab right there where all the seams connect. And that's the part you're going to pull out. This is important. And again, these seams lined up. And then you're going to line the folded part here, this outside seam. You're going to line that up to the line that you chose or marked out for you, because that's going to be where the fold is. So now you're going to be cutting out the back side of the pajama bottoms here. And again, following that same rule. And what you'll find is the top part here, you're going to have more of a straight line. It's not going to taper so much because that's just the way the pajama bottoms go, is they're just going to taper. There's two things that make the front and back different from each other, and one is how far out this seam here, this part here comes, the crotch part, and the shape of the top. The top part for the back is usually a pretty straight line. It's the front part that tapers down. So again, you're going to follow that line around, leaving some excess to work with just in case you make a mistake. Now, since I like these super baggy, it really doesn't matter that rise. And I don't need that extra little piece there for the back or the front or whatever. I just like them nice and loose. So for the sake of example, I'm just going to fold this back the way it was. Normally what I do, since I'm not going to cut out of this, I'm just going to leave it as it is to make it easier to fold back up. But if I'm actually going to cut this, I'm going to have my fold be as far over as I can to make the most of my fabric here, so I have plenty of excess to work with if I decide to make something else with it. But just for the example, let's stick with the natural fold line on this fabric. So the way I do it is very simple. I end up with only 2 pieces to sew together, and it doesn't matter because of how baggy they are, how this ends up looking as far as the rise and all that. But even so, even if you use the same idea to cut it out and you decide you still want a lower rise in the front, that's an easy fix too. Again, making sure all your seams are lined up really well. Pull this out all the way, this little crotch piece, then line up your legs, the seam of the legs, and then lay that outside seam along your fold line. And then this top part here should be pretty straight across. Since this is my third time laying all this out, I'm not having a lot of patience in getting this absolutely perfect on you. So especially since I'm not actually going to cut this out. So same thing here, figure out how much you need there, how much you need down there. And again, you're going to cut across where you need it. With plaid, you can just follow one of these straight lines. So pick one of those lines where you want it, and then follow it down around, and this is going to come out farther. And then same thing, follow it down, and then same thing for the bottom. And then what you'll end up with is one solid piece. And then at that point, you can take that piece to make it easier, and then to also make sure that you end up with both pieces being exactly the same. You're going to take that piece. So here's my pieces for my other pair. And then you're just going to line that up exactly as needed here, and what you'll end up with is two legs that are cut exactly the same, and then you're just going to cut that out. You can just follow that as your pattern, and that will be a lot easier than fussing with the other pair. Once you have that first leg figured out and it's cut out, then you can easily cut out the second leg. So remember, this is folded over, so what I have here is one solid piece of fabric, and that's one whole leg. And so then all I have to do is sew this seam here, same thing on the other leg, and I'll show you that on the sewing machine, and then sew the two legs together, and then you have your pants put together. Then it's a matter of doing the hem and the waistband. So let's go over to the sewing machine and I'll show you how we do that. Okay, and so for those of you who are new to my channel, this is a treadle machine. Yes, you can buy them like this. I'll go ahead and put the link to it. It's actually about $100 more now than what I paid for it quite a few years ago. But I love this machine. So they make modern machines that are already a treadle machine, and I already had the table because it was gifted to me from my mother-in-law a long time ago. So I don't bother unfolding any of this. Once I've got it cut out, I just start sewing from that edge right there and then all the way down. And I always use a zigzag stitch. That's just the way I do. And depending on how much edges you left for your seam allowance is going to depend on how close you sew to that edge. Since I use a zigzag stitch, it's okay for me to go a little closer to the edge than I would if I was just using a straight stitch. Okay, and then I always double, triple over the stitching on the beginning and the end for added hold, and then turn that right side out once you have that done. And then I'm going to go ahead and stitch the second leg. And when you line these up, if you followed the more contoured shape, a lower rise, and this part here is shorter because that's the front, then what you'll see is when you line these little corners up here, you're going to have the back edge is going to come back like this. So if I had the front piece, it'd be coming out like that, and then it would be kind of angled this way. So just be prepared for that if you're cutting it that way. But these should be pretty lined up because of the way that I cut them out. Of course, after this came unfolded because I dropped it and had to pick it up. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch this. No need to watch the whole thing there. Okay, finished stitching that. Same thing here. I want to turn this right side out. You're going to line up the two inner pieces where the crotch is. That's where you want to start with. Obviously, if you have a definite front and back, you're going to want to make sure those line up too. And it should naturally do that if you did it right. And since this fabric, by the way, looks the same either way, that's something else you have to look at if you have only a one-sided fabric where you only have the print really on one side. Then when you're cutting out those two different legs, if you've got the front edge and the back side, if the front and back are different, you're going to want to make sure that you cut it so they're opposite of each other. That's going to be important. But because of the way I do it is a super, super easy way, I don't have to worry about all that. And so you're just going to line up the top edges. I always start by lining up these inner parts first, and then again lock down your stitch, and just follow that seam all the way around. So what you end up as far as seams go, you only have 3 total seams when you're doing it the way I'm doing it here. You just have the seam that goes from front around to the back, and then the seam that goes down the inner part of the leg. And then when I get here to where the inner seam, all the seams line up, I like to double, triple over that, because a lot of times that's where that tends to be a wear point, most likely to come apart. So you don't have to, I just recommend it. Okay. So now if you do decide you want it more contoured and you want a lower rise in the front, but you already cut it out the same way I did, all you have to do is figure out how much lower you need in the front, and then fold the front part over like so, and then you're going to cut it, I would say only go about that far. I don't know, maybe 8 inches in or so. Take a look at the pants that you based it off of to get an idea how much lower it is, and then how far in that taper goes. And you're just going to start from, well, you can start from either side, and I would say start small and then just kind of add, cut off more if you need to, and you're just going to taper down to the total amount of difference that you're going to have. If this was the front seam, maybe I'm going to start from about here and just do a straight line, but tapering it down this way before I move on to the next step. I'm not concerned about that because I don't care, and I like the way the other ones feel. And again, I'm just all about keeping it as simple as possible. So what I do then is I start from either side, and I'm going to set this on the loosest stitch. Now, you don't have to take this step. You can use pins instead. I prefer to do this. I do this when I'm sewing skirts too, is I stitch down that hemline first, and still using a zigzag stitch, which I prefer. I just like a zigzag. Most is what I use most of the time, though I do obviously use a straight stitch for some things. And anyway, I just stitch down the hem all the way around. Then determine, if it's undetermined already, what side is going to be the front side. And you're going to take some chalk, a pencil, whatever it is, colored pencil, a pen, doesn't matter, because this part's not going to show. And this is if you want to do a drawstring. If you're just going to do an elastic waistband, this step isn't necessary. I prefer drawstrings because then I can adjust it to however I want it. So you figure out how wide you want that to be, and then where you want your drawstring to be. You can add a stitch here if you want to have just a little bit of a ruffle and you don't need this part to be that wide. I need the drawstring holes to be here. So I figure about halfway down that front part, and how I do that is I just simply, after I have this folded over to the width I want, then I fold this back, and then that's where I'm going to put my line. It's not showing up. And this way, I thought I had a black Sharpie in here, but whatever. This is on the inside, so no one's going to see it. And I just make a line across there, because that's where I'm going to put the holes for the drawstring. It's going to be on either side. The way I like to do it, I like to have it on either side of the seam itself. And then I set this on 1, so pretty tight. You can go all the way down to 0 for a very, very tight satin stitch. It doesn't need to be quite that tight, but you want it good enough that it's going to hold, because you're going to cut holes in this. And then I just follow that line. I went a little far that way, so I don't have to go quite that far over. And I make just basically it's just a nice long triangle and a very tight stitch, or pretty tight stitch anyway. And I love that I can follow the lines of the flannel to keep me on track. And then up the side. And then you can, if you want, come back. You've already got this seam here, so it's not as necessary. But because I'm the kind of person I am, I'm still going to do this. Because I do the same thing in my skirts, is I put a divider stitch right here. Okay. Then Make sure you trim your threads. Before you fold that over and hem that waistband down, you want to take a seam ripper or scissors and cut a hole in these at this point. Don't wait until after you have it folded over, because it will be much harder and you'll be more apt to cut or rip this side, and that's the side you don't want ripped. Then from there, you're just going to fold it over, stitch all the way around, and then you'll have your waistband in place. So I'm going to loosen that stitch back up because it doesn't need to be that tight anymore. Again, I like to double or triple my stitches over there to lock them in place. Locking my stitch down, and there's my waistband in place. Now, if you're doing an elastic waistband, what you do is you skip the step with the holes. Start from the back, start in a little bit, leaving a gap here, stitch all the way around, locking your stitches here. Then you're going to thread your elastic in through this hole here, stitch the elastic ends together, and then you're going to finish off stitching this close, the casing for the elastic. But I'll show you what I'm going to do with the waistband here in a minute. Then obviously the next thing is doing your hem, which is going to be nice and wide because that's the way I wanted it. So I'm just going to fold this over. In this case, when I'm doing a hem like this where it's not real long, I don't have to work with all that. I don't bother doing the stitching it down first, the hem part, only when I'm doing a long waistband like that, just to help keep me on track. But this isn't as much to work with, so I just fold it over and go that way. Again, you can iron this down, ironing your hem over to make sure you stay on track. But I just fold and go. That's how I do it. Especially when I'm working with something where I can, like the plaid, where I can just line everything up to the lines I've got there that are naturally in the fabric. It makes it so much easier. If this was just a standard print, I'd probably take more time making sure it was properly lined up, but I don't have to worry about that so much when I can follow the lines that are already in the fabric. Okay, there's one leg, and now I just got to hem the other leg. Okay, bottom, other leg done. Let's move on to that drawstring. All right, so for your drawstring, that's going to be entirely up to you what you want to use. What I do is I like to crochet my own drawstring. I can see in this first pair that I made, and I make it nice and long. So if I want to wear them really loose, I can just have it loosely tied, or I can tighten them up as much as I want. So if you know how to crochet, basically all you're doing, I happen to have some yarn right here. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I like to use 3 strands of yarn whenever I'm doing a drawstring, and it's the same method I use to make my hair ties, and I have a video just on that if you want a little bit more instruction, but I'll just show you just to get started. I always leave a tail because that's going to be my fringe, part of my fringe, and then I just crochet however long I want it to be. You're just doing obviously a chain stitch to get going. And if you're curious about this hook, it's one of the ones that Patrick made for me out of hardwood. I don't want to go too far because this is a new skein of yarn. I don't want to pull all that out. Just make it as long as you want and just keep testing it on how long you want it to be against your own self. And then once you have that done and you finish off your ends and you got your little tassel, again, I show all this in that hair tie video, so I'll make sure I link to it in the description box down below. Then what you'll need is something to thread it with. I find diaper pins. I had a lot because I did cloth diapers with my kids, and that was before all the Velcro and all that. So I used the diaper pins, but you can actually just buy packets of diaper pins just for craft reasons, and I use them a lot for threading. I like it because they have the nice smooth head here that's less likely to get caught on stuff, and they're nice and big, especially for going through something like this. So if your holes that you made are just a little on the small side, you can just take the scissors and snip them a little bit bigger. Once the hole's already there, that's easier to do, but trying to make a fresh hole when it's already stitched down is harder. And then you just start threading your drawstring through there. If you've already got your knots in place like I do, I used to not bother doing that. It can be a little harder working that end into place. Then just start threading it all the way through and work your way all the way around making sure you're constantly pulling that yarn as you go. See how I bunch and then pull, and just keep doing that until I get to the other hole back on the front side again. And another option you can do is, if you prefer like the way a lot of sweatpants are with the elastic bottom, you can take that casing that you made at the bottom and just put a little bit of elastic in there, how tight or loose as you want it, so you don't have to worry about your pants dragging. I prefer to have them loose, especially if it's the middle of the night and I'm having a hot flash. I want them loose, and I can pull them way up and let my legs cool off as need be, or whatever. It's just, that's just the way I like it. I don't like elastic on me, especially when I'm trying to sleep. And then pull that through. And again, if you already have your drawstring knotted like I do, it's going to be a little tight going through there, but it shouldn't be a problem. And then just make sure you grab the back side, and then pull that through until it's even. You have to do a little fussing with it. Pulling that around until you get it even in the front, which that's pretty even. And then if you want to help keep it from coming undone in the, coming out in the wash or pulling out, you can stitch your drawstring down in the back right here. Just stitch it right here a few times. And obviously you don't want to stitch it anywhere else, but right here, that will keep it from pulling through and getting uneven. I usually don't have too much of a problem with that, especially with flannel. And then there you go. And now I got another completed pair of pajama bottoms ready to go, ready to wear. So I'm all excited to have some nice new comfy pajama bottoms to wear. All right, well, I hope that wasn't too confusing the way I laid all that out and tried to explain all the different ways of doing it. And again, it depends on just how you want them to fit is going to depend on how you cut it out. And if you like them really baggy like I do, then what you'll find is the rise and all that stuff is not likely going to matter. You don't have to buy brand new fabric. You can either find used sheets, or maybe you have some old sheets that you don't use anymore. If they're nice, especially for summertime, you might just like that simple lightweight cotton fabric for making some summertime pajama bottoms. And then for winter, if you have some old flannel sheets, use those to make yourself some pajama bottoms. Oh, and for this fabric, it was bought new. I got this from fabric.com. It's actually, whenever I have to buy fabric new, I always buy it from fabric.com. I'll put a link in the description box down below. And they have all kinds of fabrics there, especially if you're looking for specialty fabrics with special types of prints on them. Back when I was doing the aprons and skirts for custom orders, that's where I could usually find what someone was requesting. And if you're interested in more sewing videos, I'll also put the whole playlist down below. I have videos in there showing you how to use a treadle machine. Some of those are pretty old. How to change the belt on a treadle machine. And then just some other simple sewing projects that you might enjoy, including one of the very first videos I put out, and that was making a nice full frontier skirt out of a recycled sheet that I picked up for 50 cents at a garage sale. That's been one of my more popular videos through the years. So don't forget to check those out by clicking on either show more right down here below my channel name, or the little gray arrow on this side if you're on a smart device. Thanks for watching, take care, and God bless.